So we're rapidly approaching September and the next wave of Warhammer 3 info, which will likely include an actual release date, finally. Whether that will be good news or bad news, unfortunately, I have no idea at the moment. It's been 4 years since Game 2, so a delay into 2022 would be pretty frustrating, especially as a content creator. I like ad money and I like making a lot of money in November and December, and if that doesn't line up, that'll make me quite sad, but I'm hoping we're still looking at a mid-November timetable for a variety of reasons, and the biggest one is that I'm just tired of waiting and want to move to Game 3 finally. Please, Lord, can we just move on to Game 3 now? No matter what happens, Cathay will be the main focus of September's reveals, and if the trend set by Core and Kislev holds true, they will need a nemesis to face off against in their own trailer. That will come in the form of either the Ogre Kingdoms as the pre-order bonus, or in the cackling, maniacal, eldritch armies of Tzeentch, the Great Deceiver. Either one of those matchups makes sense, either one will make the vast majority of people happy, so September should be fun for the whole family. But in the meantime, I want to walk it back to the May and June marketing cycle one more time and talk a little bit more about Kislev and what we didn't see for the Icy Northern Realm. When we're discussing a faction's implementation, the elements that don't make an appearance often tell us just as much about the future as the ones that do. If you remember a couple months back, the Kislev roster reveal was a bit of a divisive topic. Not just because of the, as some would argue, overwhelming emphasis on bears and ice, but also because it was handled somewhat strangely from a marketing perspective. We got that really cool trailer and an awesome sneak peek at the roster on May 18th, and then literally didn't get another reveal until a full month later on June 15th. Naturally, a lot of people concluded CA were building up to some huge unveiling for Kislev during that time, and then when the day finally rolled around, and it ended up being the exact same units we already knew were coming. Why wait a full month to tell us stuff we already knew? I have no idea, but if you're anything like me, you were a bit underwhelmed by the whole experience. Overall, I think the Kislev roster is solid, and should be more than enough fun on launch day, but there are some noticeable absences that hint towards the future, and that is what I want to talk about today. The first thing I noticed was the disconnect between Kislev as a legendary lord and a lack of units tied to the Grand Orthodoxy, this brave new religion that is at the heart and center of Kislev's revamped lore. At the moment, we really only have patriarch heroes as representatives of the church. There are no zealots, no rank-and-file troops, no battle standards, or anything else that ties into that religious iconography and idealism to Kislev and his unique faction, which I do think is a weird design decision. If you're going to forge this grand orthodoxy at the heart of Kislevite society and create a new lord to lead them, you'd think there'd be a section of the army dedicated fully to it. At the moment, there's not. Perhaps that will come later. But the most noticeable exclusion from previously established Warhammer lore comes in the form of Winter Most Dark and Terrible, the power of the land itself, the forces of the Ancient Widow. These are the supernatural spirit elements of Kislev's armies, and rather than joining the Winged Lancers or Zargard on crusade against the forces of chaos, they quite literally rise up from the earth to defend the motherland when it is threatened. The Ancient Widow is at the very core of what makes Kislev Kislev. She's the great spirit that whispered into Khan Queen Mishka's ear to travel west and settle the land more than a millennia before the current timeline, and it is this same spirit that imbues Kislev with mystical power, granting a fraction of her own supernatural abilities to the Ice Queen and all the other witches of the Ice Court. It's the reason we see units like the giant elemental Ice Bear, quite literally an avatar of Kislev's ability to rise up and beat the ever-living piss out of invaders. If you march on this kingdom with ill intent, be prepared to not just face the standing armies of the realm, but the elements themselves, the flora, the fauna, the shield-sundering blizzards, the swarms of freaky little winter creatures gnawing at your ankles. Everything will rise up and try to kill you. And that is why Kislev never fell, until the narrative demanded that it must, of course. Even the hardened, God-blessed warriors of the north, numbering in their untold, impossible millions, never fully cracked this somewhat tiny ice realm here. Of course, Kislev had quite a bit of help from the Empire on that front, but the fact that any faction could literally sit at the doorstep of chaos and hold the line is extremely impressive. So there are already nods to the Ancient Widow and the power of the land in the current Kislev unit roster. Ice Queen, Ice Witches, Elemental Ice Bear, but there's another huge section of it that has no representation whatsoever. And contrary to what some people have argued so far, saying they think they've been retconned out and won't play any further role in Kislev's lore for the old world, I think they will continue to be a core part of canon moving forward. Think like Clan Scryer, the armies of Sotek, or the battle for Karak 8 Peaks before them, they're being held onto for DLC. I'm, of course, talking about the forces of Baba Yaga, the hags, and the freakish monsters of this icy realm, which is where those mystical, spiritual elements will really have a chance to shine. I think a lot of players gravitate towards Kislev because in many ways they're grounded like the Empire. Faith, steel, gunpowder, cav charges, and regular foot troops against hellish creatures and hordes of demons and monsters from the Immaterium. And all of that is true. But I think what makes Kislev cool is all that stuff juxtaposed with the evil spirits, the elemental creatures, and boogeymen that lay dormant during those long years of winter, only to spook the first set of invaders that set foot in the realm. They complement each other very nicely from a lore perspective, each being invaluable assets in the wars against the Dark Gods, and that will be doubly true on the battlefields of Warhammer 3. Naturally, we need a legendary lord or legendary hero to lead this section of the army, and Baba Yaga is the natural choice for that role. If that name sounds familiar to you, that's because it's appeared in movies like John Wick, where he's referred to as the Boogeyman, and much more importantly, she's been one of the most ubiquitous characters in Slavic culture over the last several centuries. Remember that Kislev is a conglomeration of many different sources of inspiration: Russian, Polish, Hungarian, Slavic. It's just a big medley of Eastern European goodness. Essentially, she is a deformed, angry old hag who lives in a hut that she can summon to life, walking on big old chicken legs, stomping anyone and anything who gets in her way. If that sounds awesome to you and you feel like that needs to be in Warhammer 3, then you have good taste. In Slavic culture, in our world, she is one of the more versatile characters I've come across in mythos or folklore of any kind, really. Sometimes she's an evil monster hunting down children and eating them alive. Sometimes she's an ambiguous force of nature that helps push along the narrative. Sometimes she's a kindly spirit who helps the protagonist in their mission, whatever the hell it may be. It feels like in most stories she appears in, her depiction and role is different depending on what the author is trying to convey. In Warhammer, that same ambiguity carries over, where she is neither a force for evil, nor any type of hero on the front lines ready to lay her life down for the kingdom. She's a solitary, powerful witch, gnarled and beaten by the ravages of time, adorning her sanctuary with the skulls and bones of trespassers, uncaring of the plight faced by the average Ungol or Gospodar citizen. Her crooked hut stands on chicken legs of bronze forged by the mystic arts, glowing with unearthly light in the haunted forest at the heart of Kislev's birchwood forests. When the time for battle comes, her enchantments bring the hut to life, carrying her to war, stomping through opposition and tearing them apart as she blasts the enemy with ice magic and dark magic, which is a rare thing indeed for a human to wield in the Warhammer setting. But then she isn't entirely human. She's ancient beyond reckoning and imbued with the power of the land itself. She's not an explicitly evil mirror of the Ice Queen Zarina Katerin, but she certainly is a dark mirror of her, taking all the tropes associated with the Ice Court and flipping them on their head. Naturally, she'd be joined by the Hag Witches and Hag Mothers, those Ungol wise women who developed the witch sight and showed aptitude in summoning the spirits of Kislev. And that witch sight, which is an important element of any mage in Warhammer Fantasy, is especially problematic here because it's both a blessing and a curse. While they're granted great power and wisdom to defend home and hearth, the magic they wield leads to premature aging and their youth quickly fades away. In battle, they become avatars of the Ancient Widow, channeling her rage and taking on an unearthly, hellish form, 8 feet tall with flowing iron hair, glowing eyes, and vicious rending talons. Amongst their ranks, there are those who specialize in summoning or banishing supernatural creatures, known as Spirit Witches. There are those who communicate with the dead and divine the future, known as Fate Witches. And there are those who ward against the influence of chaos and disease, known as Folk Witches. And each have their own special set of curses and spells to draw from. Those who can summon spirits are particularly important in the defense of the motherland because their hauntings make it difficult or impossible in some cases for trespassers to advance without undergoing devastating attrition. The same reason why it's difficult for a modern conventional army to root out a guerrilla force that's fighting door-to-door unconventional wars, only this time, instead of AKs and RPGs, it's a ghostly apparition with daggers for claws that will rip your eyes out the second you set foot in the wrong forest or knock on the wrong door. Kislev is a haunted land, and the caves, icy swamps, and frozen oblasts are teeming with angry spirits ready to punish invaders. Along those same lines, there are creatures endemic to the windswept steppes that can be controlled by ice witches or hags, or will otherwise assault those who venture too close to their lairs and deserve to be in the Kislevite roster as well. Frost Fiends are a perfect example of that. Native to the far reaches of the northern oblast, they are savage spirits, described as bringers of night and the chief enemy of Daz, the sun god. They become one with the snows and blizzards, bat-winged monsters with white fur and razor-sharp talons, endlessly searching for prey with their heat vision. Hawks of Mishka are another such creature, great blue hawks of the World's Edge Mountains that have all the intelligence of an eagle or dragon, and the same savagery as well. In ages long past, they helped the Khan Queen Mishka avoid an ambush that would have seen the ruination of this fledgling nation, and in response, she imbued them with the magic of her people. Since those times, Kislevite armies have often been accompanied by great flights of these majestic birds, and they regard this as a sign of divine favor. It can also be summoned by the magic of the Ice Court, crystallizing out of thin air and swooping down upon a target, tearing them apart, anything apart that's too stupid or slow to get the hell out of dodge. But there's really no reason to stop there with just the Hawks and just the Frost Fiends. With the elemental nature of Kislev and how it defends itself, anything related to weather and the natural or supernatural fauna that inhabits the realm, anything of that line could be combined into units that fit the theme we're going for here. And it's an element that has been largely unexplored on the roster up to this point. An element that would bring a lot of diversity and flavor, which is ultimately one of the major selling points of Warhammer 3. I can't say I was surprised that we didn't get to see them on launch day because it all fits into a cohesive theme that would be perfect for DLC and one of the first Lord Packs after launch, but I would have very much liked to have seen a few more mystical elements of the day one roster, and I think Baba Yaga and a folklore-inspired Lord Pack would really help flesh them out. In the comment section below, let me know if there are any other creatures, spirits, units, or characters that deserve to make it into the Kislev roster before this trilogy is done, and I will see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.